La diffusion vient de démarrer. Tous les participants sont en mode écoute seule.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to greet you and to welcome you to the 6NR Technical Webinar Series. For the next 3 months, this series will focus on best practices in using spatial data, example from around the world. My name is Mario Marigo. I am the UNDP Technical Specialist for the 6th National Report to the CBD project and will be facilitating this webinar today together with my colleague Prudence Rain and Martin Cadena. Spatial data, as you know, can help us understand where biodiversity and ecosystem services are located, how human pressures impact nature, and the potential impact of conservation actions. These data can also help improve the effectiveness of measures to achieve the Aichi biodiversity targets and will guide the implementation of the CBD post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We challenge countries to double the number of maps in their 6 national reports compared to the 5th national report. And we're on track to succeed. And it's now time to showcase best practices and learn from each other. And to do so, through this webinar series, we will host 4 webinars to demonstrate how 16 countries are using spatial data to enhance biodiversity conservation. In this context, our very first webinar session will focus on using National Spatial Data Platform to guide policies on nature. Today, we will have 4 presentations from 4 different countries: Indonesia, Colombia, Peru, and Costa Rica. Before we begin, I would like to share with you some rules and dynamics for this webinar sessions. Microphone will be muted during the presentation because that reduces interferences and facilitates the communication. The session will last 2 hours. After the presentation from our colleague, we will open the floor for questions and remarks. If you think of a question while the presentation is in progress, you can use the control panel and write it down. And when the Q&A session comes, I will read your question to our speakers so he or she can answer it. If you want to speak and the connection allows it, we will open your microphone during the Q&A session. To let us know that you'd like to speak, you can simply raise your hand by clicking on the hand button on the control panel. This session is being recorded and we will post it on the NBSAP Forum YouTube channel. We'll also share the presentation on the NBSAP Forum via email. So for information, the presentations for today's webinar will be given in English. However, I am a native French speaker and my colleague Martin is a native Spanish speaker. As such, we're happy to take questions in the 3 languages and we will translate them if necessary. Similarly, we can translate the responses from our panelists in English to French and Spanish if needed. En français, pour information, la présentation du webinaire d'aujourd'hui sera donnée en anglais. Cependant, je suis francophone et mon collègue Martine est hispanophone. Et nous pouvons donc prendre vos questions en anglais, en espagnol, en français, et nous les traduirons si nécessaire. De même, on peut traduire les réponses de l'anglais vers le français et l'espagnol si vous le souhaitez. Y para información, la presentación del webinar de hoy será en inglés, sin embargo, soy francófona y mi colega Martín habla español. Por lo tanto, podemos responder sus preguntas en inglés, español y francés, y las traduciremos si es necesario. Y de manera similar, podemos traducir las respuestas de inglés a francés y al español si es necesario. I want to welcome warmly and thank our colleague from those 4 countries to be our speakers today. First, Pisha Tias will present the work done in Indonesia. Then Susana Rodriguez Boritica will present the work done in Colombia. After that, Alex Rogers and Brano Ramirez will present the works done in Peru. And finally, Rafael Monge, together with Maribea Gadio and Eugenia Arguedas Montezuma, will present the work done in Costa Rica. So let's start with Indonesia and with Pisha Tias. Pisha is coordinating the landscape implementation of the DECISSION-funded Good Grow Partnerships Production Project in Indonesia. She completed a master's in public administration and development practice at Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs, focusing on climate change and sustainable development. Pisha, thank you so much for being with us. I know it's late where you are. Very exciting to hear your experience. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry, I apologize. First, I'm in the field right now. So if you see, I'm getting cut off, let me know. It's the internet. So So we, in 2017, we started this Good Growth Partnership implementation in Indonesia, and UNGP is coordinating the entire Good Growth Partnership Impact Program implementation while we're leading the production project. We also collaborate with the IFC, who is leading the work on the transaction side, and the UNFFI on with UNFFI, and WWF on the demand. So the project itself really tackles, the issue on deforestation from commodity production, not only from the production side, but also from the demand and the transaction side. And in Indonesia, we have been struggling with a land use change monitoring tool. The government has their own monitoring tool, but it's not open for the public. And then there's the Global Forest Watch, which is less likely, or at this moment is because of the sensitivity of the issue related to sustainable palm oil, and which palm oil is viewed as the driver of deforestation in Indonesia. The government is very sensitive. When we utilize the data coming from the Global Forest Watch, they're seeing the Global Forest Watch as like a means to black campaign the Indonesian palm oil. And so we decided to work together with the government and a public institution, in this case the IPB, or Bogor Agriculture Institution, who is viewed as more on academic side and more neutral. And we developed the land use change monitoring tool for Indonesia, where we collaborate not only with the academic institution, but also with the government's agency, it's Indonesia's space agency. So the hope is that this tool is going to be public, and mainly it's utilized by the government, but also can also be utilized by the community and also the NGO and other stakeholders. The purpose of this tool is, it doesn't seem like my slide is working. So the purpose of this tool is to monitor the state of the forest and also the state of the land use change and encroachment in Indonesia. We have been, Indonesia is one of the major remaining tropical forests. And we all know that the forest has been threatened by the expansion of commodities, especially palm oil. And so the system that we develop really, aims to address the four, we call like principle. We need to provide the real-time monitoring system at the monthly, if not annual. And this is because the annual land cover data that is issued by the government is, there's like a 1 year time lag. So let's say you want to see the land cover change for 2018, you will only see the data, coming in 2019. So in terms of enforcement, with the time lag, it's hard to address the situation when, it's starting. Because, like if you see the data a year after, and then, it's already sometimes, most of the time it's actually too late to take action. And so this system is going to provide that near real-time monitoring system. And then we're also going to using the eventually using the automatic algorithm to generate the annual change data for key commodities. So this tool is not only generating the data on the expansion of palm oil, but also the rubber, rice, coffee, and cocoa. These commodities are the key commodities in Indonesia. And the system has a GIS web platform. So it is like the Global Forest Watch. But the focus is not so much on, like targeting deforestation, but also looking at the commodity and land suitability. And we also equipped the tool with a monitoring system we call early warning system. And so in our pilot implementation, we have 3 districts and 3 provinces, and we do detailed monitoring and on encroachment in these 3 areas. We hope to expand in other areas in Indonesia, but like for the purpose of this project, we're going to focus mainly on these 3 landscapes that the project is working on. So this is the platform that we have for the LUCM. By the way, LUCM is not the name. we still have to change the name, and we haven't thought of what the good name for this tool. So right now we just call it like LUCM. So we have data, and then we will generate raster data, and also like I forgot the other one. So the data is uploaded to the GIS server, and then the user will be able to provide information, but also to and also to validate the data that is shown, at the platform. So suppose that we show like this encroachment data on the platform, then the user will be able to see, and also provide information and also validate, because we're using algorithms. Sometimes there's a mistake or there's error, and the user can actually validate whether or not the encroachment is happening. Or if the system doesn't detect the encroachment, and if let's say the community detects there's an encroachment going on in that area, they can also provide the data, and that data will be received by us, and we will upload it to the server, and then we put it on the platform, and we call that the VGI system, which is like crowdsourcing SIM. This is the cloud mosaic product that we have, and the national land cover product. And so we're using a lot of different data. So right now we're using MODIS, we're using Landsat, we're using Sentinel. So sometimes in a part of Indonesia, you can't just use one type of satellite image, because the clouds and stuff, and so we use composite. And this is just the technique of the system. I don't want to go into technical matter, but this is how we generate the pattern change and also land change data. And this is how the system will look like on the platform. And so we have the annual change detection, and then it's being translated into the web GIS, and then there's the mobile application where the stakeholders, the users can upload additional information or verify the information that we have in the system. And we also integrate the tool with the government's national forest monitoring system. And this is where we actually work with the government, and this is how we see that the tool can contribute to the monitoring that the government is doing. LAPAN is actually Indonesia's space agency, so we receive most of our data and information from LAPAN. This is a public institution owned by the government, and who owns the data that is also used by the government. And so we're using the same data that the government of Indonesia is using. And MOEF is the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, so we use the classification that they have. And then LAPAN, IPB, the university, and UADB work together on generating data, for the land use monitoring tool. This is the system again, like how we integrate. There's basically there's dashboard, there's browser, and then mobile application, and then the tool will enable users to do query, and then some analysis and visualization. We're going to talk about that later. Also, so the data that we generate can be in the form of vector and also raster. This is the raster display. We're still working. We haven't finished with the prototype, so this is how it will look like with more improvement in the future. We'll have the time series data for key commodities and also the forest cover. Right now, I believe that we have it from 2000 to 2018, but we actually have more than that. It's just that we're not going to be showing in the tool, considering the infrastructure that we have right now. And this is the raster data that we will be able to generate using the tool. And this is the add function. So in Indonesia, there are a lot of sensitive data, and let's say like there's this ongoing letter circulated by the coordinating Ministry of Economic Affairs, telling the stakeholders not to share the concession license data, to the public. That data is actually very important for monitoring, but unfortunately, that kind of sensitive data, like for that kind of sensitive data, we cannot show it on our tool, because this tool is going to be used by the government, and we want to respect the like the decision that the government makes. However, in this tool, we enable some additional analysis function. So let's say you have the sensitive data and you want to overlay the data on the information that we have on the LUCM. You can actually add that data, and then you just have to do an extra work, which is overlaying the data on the information that we have like on the LUCM, and then you will be able to do more analysis through this add data function. So while this tool is not gonna provide you with a lot of sensitive information that government considers like private, if you do have that data, then you can still utilize the tool to do an extra analysis, and you will be able to see that analysis for yourself. It's not going to be available for the public. And this is the query and display that you could do on the tool. So you can see the area, and then you can do the timeline analysis, and also select the administrative or jurisdiction that you want to take a better look at. So you want to see Central Kalimantan, then you can just do the query. So you don't need to see like other data from different parts of Indonesia. You can like actually select which areas of Indonesia that you would like to see the data for. And this is the early warning system. So the early warning system detects the tree cover change at 8-day basis. So like every 8 days, we're going to generate the encroachment data, and then it will show you each like every 8 days how large the encroachment is, and also seeing whether the encroachment is still going on or has halted. Yeah, and so this is like the analysis that the tool is doing. So like the first is, let's say, on the 1st and 8th January, and then the second detection is like between 9 to 16 January. So it's on the 8 days basis. And this is the like the view of the tool. And this is the like zoom, and say like the red one is the first 8 days, and like the yellow, the yellow one is the first 8 days, so like 8 times 4 days kind of. Yeah, and so this encroachment data, we were trying to do it for the whole Indonesia, but we're going to focus mainly on the 3 landscapes that we're working in, or the 3 provinces that we're working in under the JEP project. Of course, like if times permits and there's an additional funding, we will try to do it for the entire Indonesia. There are a lot of areas that the project is not working in, but are like being affected a lot by deforestation, especially from commodity expansion. Already ran out of time, so that's it from me.
This is great. Thank you, Pisha. Thanks so much for the insightful presentation. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we will take all the questions after all the presentations. So to the participants, if you do have questions, please write them down and keep them for the Q&A session. All right, so thanks again, Pisha. And let's now move to South America with Colombia and our colleague Susana Rodriguez Borritica. Susana has a PhD in evolution, ecology, and organismal biology from the Ohio State University. She focuses on exploring patterns and processes affecting plant community assembly and plant population dynamics by integrating data analytics, modeling, and ecological experiments. She leads the Researcher Spatial Ecology Lab, the Biodiversity Science Program at Humboldt University Institute. Welcome, Susana. The floor is yours, and I'm just going to make you presenter.
Oh, okay.
Up. There you go. Good. Let's give just a second. Perfect. We can see. I think your Wi-Fi is turned on. I'm just going to turn it off so we have just your screen. Perfect. And then you can put your presentation full screen so we can see it perfectly.
There?
Great. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Marianne, and thanks for the invitation. As Marianne said, I'm a researcher at Alexander von Humboldt Institute, and despite the name, it's a 100% Colombian institution. and is one of the 5 institutions attached to the Environmental Ministry in Colombia, in charge of translating technical information into information that could be used for decision making and policy making. And we are particularly deal with information regarding biodiversity. We are an institution divided in 4 programs, and I'm going to show you what we have done with the UN Biodiversity Lab information in 3 of those programs. I mean, the first one is the Biodiversity Assessment and Monitoring Program. This program is the liaison with the Environmental Ministry and is the one that compiles some of the information on biodiversity that goes into the national reporting. So in this sense, this was the program in charge of doing the evaluation of the usefulness of UN Biodiversity Lab information. So we did that in the context of a much larger project running by this program, and is the consolidation of a Colombian bond, which is a national initiative for biodiversity observation network within the spirit of the GeoBond of the Geo Group. So the idea here is to create a network of experts to standardize and help characterize biodiversity and monitor biodiversity. So the essential concept behind this is estimating essential biodiversity variables, or applying the concept of essential biodiversity variables, which are standardized and complementary information that you can estimate out of different sources of information. And you can use to produce indicators that help you characterize and monitor biodiversity. So within the spirit, the idea of the project that has been running for several years already is to get the standardized workflow from just the raw information that could come from the UN Biodiversity Lab, NASA, or the European Spatial Agency, to have standardized methods to curate the data, to estimate essential biodiversity variables, to have the indicators and to present the indicators to users, and to allow users to interact the information according to the questions that they might have. So the latest development within this project is the web application called BioTablero, which is a decision support system for Colombia that works by modules and is geared towards environmental authorities or researchers. So this is a screenshot. I don't know if you see my arrow. I hope you do, but
yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so the BioTablero works by modules, and if you are a researcher, you probably might want to interact with it using this module that allows to see all the scripts and all the raw information that we are using to produce EBVs or indicators. And you can use that for your research. If you are an environmental authority, you probably would like to use more the compensation, the environmental offsets module, which is this one I'm showing here, that allows you to estimate where and how environmental offsets should be applied in case infrastructure project comes to your desk, for example. And this is the webpage that you can check. Is under development, but some of the modules and the functionality is already working. And so under this big project of having this standardized workflow from raw information to indicators is under which we evaluated the UN Biodiversity Lab information for the biodiversity reporting. And we did that following the indicators suggested by the CDB, and we ask the information 2 questions. What does the information respond to in terms of sustainable development goals, for example, like targets or EBVs, and how useful is that information to Colombia? Is it complementary to Colombian information? Can we replicate it within Colombia? So we evaluated several layers, and 16 of those layers came from the UN Biodiversity Lab. So this is the way we did it. We just created 2 tables. This is the first one, in which we categorized information in terms of the type of information is giving us. If it's telling us something about pressure, state, or response, which sustainable development goal is giving us information on, IET target, or the type of EBD we can estimate out of that information. I will give you a couple of examples. Those come from the UN Biodiversity Lab, and this is the first. Above ground life woody carbon density change, and you can see that we already estimated or we already downloaded the data for Colombia and evaluate which goals or targets is useful for. Here is another example, biodiversity intactness. So we can see that this information answers to species attributes and could be used to estimate abundances. The second question is how useful that information is for Colombia. And for this, we estimated for all those layers the temporality, or like reported the temporality, evaluated how complementary information is to Colombia, and how replicable that those methods are, and if we have baseline data to replicate it. So another example here, this is the geocarbon project. This is forest above ground biomass. So it's just one-time effort. It's actually quite useful for Colombia, but we detected that we cannot replicate it in the future. So that reduces the usability of the information. It's not the case with the intact forest landscape, for which we detected that it's actually complementary to the information we have in Colombia, and we were able to estimate just intact forest area as indicator, and some statistics that were included in the proposed report that we sent to the environmental ministry. So at the end, we evaluated 63 suggested indicators. Out of those, 8, and most of them came from UN Biodiversity Lab, were used to create indicators and were used to the proposed reporting, right? You can see, for example, that some of the problems with some of those layers were that the methods were not clear enough to be replicated in Colombia, and that basically reduced the usability within the country. So as I said, we had indicators produced out of all those 8 layers, and we sent the proposed reporting to the environmental ministry, and we are still waiting to see if they included some of those indicators or not. So the last part of my talk, I want to show you how we are using that information coming from the UN Biodiversity Lab in some other questions. And this in particular comes from the Biodiversity Science program. It's a program in charge of integrating biodiversity information and doing pure ecological research. So one of the questions that we had in the last year was, given that Colombia is opening up some areas for exploration after the peace deal agreement, where are the interesting areas to explore? So what you see here is the map of a state close to Bogota and Santander, and the heat map presents the intensity of information we have in certain areas, biodiversity information. And the violet layer portrays the high integrity forest, which is one of the layers from UN Biodiversity Lab. And by overlaying those 2 layers, we detected that there are at least 3 areas that have a high, or they are flagged as high integrity forest areas, but for which we don't have a very good information. So we propose to do explorations on those three areas. And this is kind of one of the uses that we are giving to the information coming from the lab. The other part, the other example comes from the territorial management of biodiversity program, and is because this is the program in charge of, or one of the projects that they're running is the construction of the human footprint index for Colombia. We already have the index that has time span larger than the one in the UN Biodiversity Lab. So the question here that we are trying to address to produce recommendations of how to use these two layers is exactly that. So how and where to use the global or the national. I think that both of them are complementary. So the idea is to explore the usefulness of each one of those and provide recommendations to end users. And I think that's it. That's my presentation. I leave you with the contact information for some of the projects that I mentioned in the presentation, in case you are more curious. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Susanna. Thanks for the great presentation. I'm sure there will be some question and interest at the end of the session. We're going to stay in Latin America and we're going to move to Peru with Alex Roger Zambrano Ramirez. He's an environmental engineer at the Universidad Nacional Federico Villarreal and works on the use of GIS for natural resources and ecosystem monitoring and evaluation. He worked for the National Commission of Aerospace Research and Development of Peru and is currently with the General Directorate of Environmental Territorial Planning of the Ministry of Environment in Peru. Alex, I am going to make you presenter, and you have the floor whenever you are ready. Do not forget to unmute yourself so we can hear you.
For the invitation, ma'am.
Perfect.
Presentation. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I will quickly present what have we been working in Peru regarding the use of geospatial data in territorial management and conservation of ecosystem. Okay, the main objective of environment is the conservation and sustainable use of natural resources, the enhancement of biological diversity and environmental quality for the benefit of people. Like with this action are framed in the three strategic axes called Clean Peru, Peru Natural, and Inclusive Peru. Initiative of adaptation of mitigation to climate change, management of marine coasts, ecosystem, and solid waste help achieve the main objective, the provision of ecosystem services and natural resources for the welfare of society of future generation. Therefore, it's necessary to evaluate and monitor the ecosystem and biodiversity of the national territory using tools and geospatial technologies that allow use the design management tools, like rules, policies, etc. The initial information comes from various sensors, as you can see in the slide, Landsat, MODIS, PeruSat, SPOT, as well as information from other institutions and field measurement. This information is systematized and processed to deliver products and services. One of the main projects achieved last year was the National Ecosystem Map. The concept definition was arduous work, research consensus with various organizations and experts. 59 ecosystems, however, due to a scale of work, scale national, only 56 ecosystems could be mapped. For the construction of the map, consider satellite information from the spot and rapid eye sensor was used, as well as cartography of natural region, humidity provinces, vegetation covers, physiography, and ecological zones, based on the consensual conceptual definition. No? Another important product is the national map of degraded areas, which have been constructed using the three indicators: the trend of productive ecosystem, change and coverage, and fragmentation in forests. To estimate the negative trend, time series of vegetation indices from MODI sensor and no parametric tents for 95% confidence was used. That is, only those pixels with a significant negative trend are considered. The calculation of loss of vegetation cover were made using Landsat image for the Amazon. For the coast and mountain, MODIS was used, using techniques of machine learning and neural networks, respectively. Forest fragmentation was only carried out in Amazonian forests and by analysis of morphological partners. But the national ecosystem map and the degraded areas have been very useful to promote, focus, and prioritize public investments in the country. Favorable condition for the occurrence on fire on vegetation cover is a model with using machine learning techniques based of the systematization on fire registration of the emerging response system of Peru and detected by MODI sensor and Landsat too, and other aspects of the territory such temperature, precipitation, vegetation cover, etc. The usefulness of the information is preventive and alert local authorities for the possible occurrence of fires. The Peru system is a tool just of the Peruvian territory, thanks to support for International Center of Tropical Agriculture, and generates information on loss and gain of plant coverage based on neural network techniques, and provided inputs for estimate of degradation areas. Also, always obtain information in almost real time and the state of the ecosystem. Okay. Peru is a country highly vulnerable of various hazards, being the most recurrent of those of landslides and floods. This recurrence has its origin in the loss of natural capital, of lack of natural infrastructure. The identification of the risks areas and the cause contribute a proposed measure for reconstruction, emphasizes the recovery and conservation of ecosystem and the ecosystem services, such as erosion control. The marine coastal ecosystem in Peru concentrates a large population and therefore a large part of the economy, including tourism. The main assets of this ecosystem are sand. Change in the coastline are the main indicator of the loss of this coverage. At present, three important bays are monitored to use geospatial resolution image, and methodologies are being evaluate to estimate the change on the national level coastline. Economic ecological zoning, CEE, and for acronym in Spanish, in Peru is integral diagnostics that seeks to identify opportunities and limitations in territory based on reliable information. Currently, more than half of the Peruvian territory already have CEE. The CEE is a model complex of territory, okay? The following slide show the more information services and resources available from our web portal. No, you visit yoservidor.minam.gov.p, so then you can access the information like areas for all Peru, ecosystem information of marine coast erosion, and condition for occurrence of 5 of the vegetative coverage. Finalizing my presentation, in this slide shows various international commitments and aspirations that Peru has signed and has with its citizens, which is necessary to have information on the state of ecosystem and take into the decision making always with a vision, ecosystem as an asset for development. On behalf of Minister of Environment on Peru, we appreciate interest in our work. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you also so much for well, sharing all your expertise. And we actually already received a question for you that I will read at the end of the presentations. So participants actually are really interested in what's being presented right now. I will turn over to Costa Rica now, which is our last country for today. And I will welcome our 3 speakers, because why having just 1 speaker when you can have 3, you know? Those 3 speakers are first Malibea Gadio, who's a biologist with a master's degree in forest and biodiversity management and conservation. And she works as a consultant landscape restoration, protected area management, adaptation to climate change, among others. And she was also the technical coordinator for Costa Rica's 6NR and in charge of spatial analysis and maps. And she will speak together with Eugenia Arguedas Montezuma. Hi, Eugenia. Pleasure to be in touch again, who's a biologist from the Ministry of Environment and Energy of Costa Rica and the coordinator of the National Ecological Monitoring Program and National Focal Point of Costa Rica for the CBD. And they will be joined, of course, by Rafael Monge, Director of the National Geo-Environmental Information Center, who is currently leading the development of the national monitoring system of the land use, land cover, and ecosystem. So, colleagues, thank you very much for being the 3 of you here today. And the floor is yours. I'm going to give the presentation right to you guys. And whenever you're ready, you can display your screen.
Merci beaucoup, Marion. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Can you see our screen?
Yes.
Okay, so we can start.
Please.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you. Well, good morning for us, actually. And thank you very much for the invitation to the 6NR technical webinar series. Also, thanks to all the people around the world that are listening to us live or in the MBSAP Forum YouTube channel. My name is Rafael Monge. As Marion said, I'm the director of the National Center of Geo-Environmental Information of the Ministry of Environment and Energy of Costa Rica. With me is Melibea Gallo, technical coordinator of the 6 Costa Rican National Report. Eugenia Arguedas, national focal point of the CBD, and who also prepared this presentation with us. Unfortunately, she is not here with us today because she was invited yesterday to participate in a radio interview related also to the 6NR.
This is
Today,
great.
We are, yeah, I'm gonna tell you more about it later.
Okay.
Today, we are in the National Center of High Technology of Costa Rica with a very nice group of researchers that work here. Thank you very much for hosting us today. And in this presentation, we're going to talk about our experience in the use of spatial data to prepare the 6th National Report and how this information is used to enhance biodiversity conservation in Costa Rica. Before we start, I want to call your attention to the map that is in the top right of this cover slide. We put this here just as a reminder that when we talk about Costa Rica, it's not only about the 51,000 square kilometer piece of land in Central America. That is only 10% of our territory. The other 90% is our sea, where we also have borders with Colombia and Ecuador. And in all of that territory, you can find 6.5% of the world's biodiversity, according to the new data provided by the 6NR. For the elaboration of the 6th report, available information on the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, NBSAP, indicators was compiled during the process. The information that could be integrated into the spatial analysis was prioritized. Both official national sources and available global sources were used. National official layers were fed with information on biodiversity coming from entities responsible for the monitoring NBSAP indicators. The spatial analysis carried out for the 6NR provided especially explicit information for 3 main processes: the elaboration of the biodiversity profile, the evaluation on progress in the NBSAP goals, and the 6NR consultation processes. More than 70 maps were developed. During the consultation with experts, perception maps were built to fit the state and current trends of biodiversity in Costa Rica. With these maps, we have identified sites and ecosystems with major pressures over biodiversity. With the experts' perception maps built in the consultation process, 15 pressures were analyzed, and those areas of conservation and those ecoregions most affected were evidenced. This figure represents the level of pressure identified for the 10 conservation areas that cover our territory. In the north, you can see the areas that have the highest levels of pressures. A very important stakeholder that participated in the consultation process were the traditional communities of Costa Rica. Maps help share their knowledge of the territory where they have lived for generations. They identified where their communities are located and what are the threats to biodiversity that they face every day. The first map is from the Gabe community, who are located in the south of Costa Rica, around Peninsula de Osa. They indicate that the main threat to biodiversity in their territory is deforestation and illegal logging. Information was also analyzed with a gender approach, which is also an important innovation in the construction of the 6NR. There you can see that the perception is not always the same when you address men or women. Here you can also see other examples of the information from the Brivri community, the Brunca, and Cabecar. Also, a protected area database that integrates indicators on management plans, management effectiveness, and landscape connectivity was built for the 6NR and made available for protected area managers and other stakeholders. In this map, you can see in red those conservation areas that doesn't have yet a management plan. This is just data from charts presented graphically to easier identify which conservation areas have more progress than others and make strategic decisions in the areas with more challenges. A protected area database that integrates indicators on landscape connectivity was built for the 6NR and made available for protected area management and other stakeholders. This figure represents biodiversity index for biological corridors. The index provides information on the number of species that potentially exist in the corridor, depending on the type of forest and the area covered. Now we're going to show two examples of how we use the global information available on the UN Biodiversity Lab platform to perform spatial analysis that fit the biodiversity profile. This figure represents the difference in the human footprint values between 2000 and 2013. Recovery processes are evidenced in conservation areas located in the west of the country, around Guanacaste and Golfo de Nicoya. High degradation processes are observed scattered in different areas of the country. We also use the information from the Biodiversity Lab to analyze the Forest Structural Condition Index. It is interesting to see that the polygons related to the protected areas in green are surrounding almost all the territories with a high forest structural condition index. Okay. Currently we are working in incorporating all this information in the official platforms of environmental information developed in the country. This slide just to show you our logos of the National System of Environmental Information, SINIA, which is constructed with the colors of the environmental indicators of the SDGs. And they use the Land Use, Land Cover, and Ecosystems National Monitoring System, CIMOCUTE. Here you can see an infographic of the conceptualization of the SINIA, which is integrated by a national network of all the environmental data providers. Currently, we are working in defining the standards to assess and guarantee the flows of information and make it available and easy to access for decision makers. We're planning the official launch of the technological platform of SINIA by the end of June. And now you can see the homepage of the CIMOCUTE website. It is cimocute.org. Here you can find information about the methodologies where we are developing for land use and land cover monitoring, and other interesting details about the process, like a calendar of all of our events in which this webinar is included, of course. And also, we want to share the website of our clearinghouse mechanism, which we call Bio Costa Rica. This has been constructed as a mechanism for exchanging and integrating information on biodiversity. You can visit it in the address chmcostarica.go.cr. And to finalize, we want to share the lessons that we learned in this process. We summarize them in 5 aspects: access, technology, capacity building, value, and engagement. There is a need to promote available tools for decision-making based on especially explicit information. Channels of communication must be improved to make information easier to access and use by decision makers. Also, the consolidation of the official platforms for the management of environmental information is required to articulate the different sources of information available in the country. There is a need to reinforce the spatial information management capacities in the state agencies, as well as to increase the knowledge about the available tools, both national and at a global level. Also, it is essential to demonstrate the importance of spatial thinking for better management of biodiversity in the country. And finally, it is needed to engage a greater number of people and institutions that generate spatial information to make it available for decision making with the appropriate permits and credits. And talking about engagement, I wanted to tell you that yesterday, for the first time in the process of national reports to the CBD, the Ministry of Environment and UNDP Costa Rica organized a presentation of the 6NR, where we showed to a very engaged audience and to the press the results of the report and the different initiatives that are being developed to enhance biodiversity conservation in Costa Rica. Here are some infographics developed to showcase this information. And currently, our colleague Eugenia, as I mentioned before, is in a mainstream radio program talking about these issues while we speak. Well, I hope you enjoy our presentation. Meribea and I are happy to take any questions you have. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. This is great. This is a pleasure also for us working on the 6NR to hear that, the 6NR is not just a report, but that many stakeholders are engaged and that you're raising awareness on those issues. So this is really interesting. Thank you so much for the presentation. And so it's been an hour now of presentation, and for the next hour also, I would like to invite the participants to share their questions, their remarks, their comments, or you can raise your hand to participate actively in the Q&A session. Please do use the control panel to share your questions. You can raise your hand by clicking the hand on the hand button, and we can open your microphone or read your question depending on your preference. Also keep in mind that this is a very international team and we're not all native English speakers, me included, so please speak slowly and clearly. And once again, we can take questions in English, French, and Spanish. So to the participants, I invite you to ask your questions. And actually, we received earlier a question during the presentation for Peru. So Alex, this is for you. The participant Heiner asked if there is an ecosystem methodology published. So I think that is a reference to the presentation you made earlier. I don't know if you have already elements of response, so maybe we can try to be in touch with this person and maybe engage a conversation.
Can you hear me in Spanish, please?
Yeah, Martin, this is your job.
Yeah, for sure. Could you please repeat the question, Mary?
Absolutely. The question is there an ecosystem methodology published?
Hola, Alex. Preguntan que si hay una metodología para los ecosistemas publicado, si hay algo publicado de las metodologías que tú presentaste.
Sí, actualmente hay un documento oficial, es una resolución ministerial, digamos que es el más alto rango de norma que puede emitir el ministerio, donde se aprueban tanto las definiciones conceptuales como el mapa en sí, ¿no? La cartografía en sí.
Okay, so the answer is yes. There is an official publication that is a ministerial resolution, which contains definitions and the methodology for official maps. Alex, ¿hay alguna manera de acceder a ello de manera pública?
Sí, estoy justo buscando para poner el link en el chat.
Okay, I am asking Alex if there is a site a public site where we can visit and see the methodology and the ministerial resolution that validates that methodology and the map itself. So Alex is going to drop a link into the chat box.
Perfect. And Heiner, I think that actually answers your second question because you just asked, ¿ese documento está publicado en la web? So yes, and the link will be dropped shortly by our colleague Alex in the chat box. Thank you for your question and thanks for the response, guys. I see that we have one hand raised actually by Moulet Tous. So I'm going to try to open your microphone and see if you can speak. Can you hear us? And can you speak, Moulet? So Moulet, there seems to be an issue with your microphone, and I am not sure you can speak, so I would encourage you to write your question. Et si je me trompe pas, je pense que vous parlez français, et je vous encourage à écrire votre question parce que je ne peux pas vous entendre avec votre micro. Ça ne semble pas marcher. Sorry about that, and thank you. So for everyone, Alex just dropped the link of the platform he was mentioning in the chat box, and you can see that in your control panel. So while waiting for more questions, We have actually a hand raised from Kuchipka. Kuchipka, I'm gonna activate your microphone. Can you hear us and can you speak?
Merci beaucoup. C'est juste merci. Je crois que cette conférence, ce VBA nous permet vraiment d'avoir une connaissance beaucoup plus approfondie en matière d'utilisation des données du 6e rapport national. Et ceci nous permet de faire des propositions et d'amener le gouvernement à prendre des décisions idoines pour la gestion durable des terres. Nous avons écouté l'exemple de Costa Rica. Donc, c'est le moment important. Je pense que nous aussi, au niveau du Togo, notre 6e rapport a fait cas de la planification de l'utilisation des terres. Et donc, nous estimons que ce rapport, au niveau de chaque État, est un outil vraiment nécessaire et indispensable pour la gestion durable des terres, donc en lien à la lutte contre le changement climatique, la désertification et donc d'orienter les planifications dans l'utilisation des terres pour le développement durable. Voilà les commentaires que je voudrais vraiment apporter.
Merci.
Je vous remercie.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Je vais donc vous traduire. So I'm going to translate in English. So Kuchipka is from Togo, actually, and his comment is to thank you all for the presentation because this whole webinar and this whole conference is really, useful and bring a lot of clarity on how to use the national data and especially the data from the 6NR. And he recalls how important it is because based on this data, then the government will make decision to sustainably manage the land. And especially, for instance, the presentation of Costa Rica, then Togo really recognizes the work done in the 6NR here. And again, it's not just about biodiversity, but it's also to fight climate change and to fight desertification. So our colleague would like to thank you very much for your presentation. Kochipka, je pense que j'ai traduit votre message. Merci
oui, ça c'est
beaucoup.
bien. Merci beaucoup pour la fidélité dans la tradition.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Alors, je vais fermer votre micro. Et I see another hand raise, actually. Mir Rodriguez Lombardo. I'm going to try to open your microphone. Do you hear us and can you speak?
Can you hear me? Yes,
Absolutely.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I have a question for the Costa Rican colleagues about the perception maps. I found the methodology really interesting, especially since in Panama, I'm from Panama, we don't have such a developed spatial information system. So it seems like a good way of gathering data about hotspots or places where we should be working. And I understand that you consulted with scientists and as well as indigenous people and local people. Can you give us a little bit more details about the methodology you used?
Yes, thank you for your question. Do you hear me?
Yes, no. We can hear you.
Okay, we work with first with experts in different panels, with experts in different groups of biodiversity and for ecosystems, and they construct based on the information that we gather first, areas, and they put all together areas with pressures for biodiversity. And in the other space and working group, we work with local communities in some the same way, but talking about pressures on biodiversity, it was more difficult for them to define specific areas for specific pressures because they think all pressures are related. And we have to think about the methodology a lot more, and we finally got some specific places for specific pressures and then analyze all together. But yes, it was the way for identifying specific areas and pressures that we don't have here, because we don't used to work with the maps. Spatially thinking is not used as much as we have to for communicate this kind of things. I'm sorry for my English is not good. I don't know if you understand me, but if you don't, please tell me and we go with Martin and say it again.
No, I clearly understood. I think it's very interesting, especially for countries like ours that don't have such a good, infrastructure for geospatial data, to develop some sort of standardized methodology for this, and that somehow we can have some, measures that we can use in local places to then have some sort of national index based on this. I don't know if it's possible, but it seems like a very, a way of going forward with having some figures for the whole country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, for that question, and also for the element of response that was extremely interesting. And I see, so Moulay has sent me his question. So let's see. The question that we have, comment orienter la gestion des aires marines protégées pour l'adaptation au changement climatique? Moulay, je ne sais pas si c'est pour un pays en particulier, cette question, ou si c'est une question un peu plus large. So Moulay's question is how to orientate the management of marine protected areas for adaptation to climate change. So this is a very broad question, and we have time to focus on it a bit. So maybe I can ask maybe Pisha, if you're still online, if you have elements of response for this question. So again, the question is how to orientate the management of marine protected areas to adapt to climate change. Do you have any elements of response on this?
No, actually, because our tool is on terrestrial, like monitoring, it's not marine.
Okay, great. I'm going to answer also slowly in French so Moulay can follow. Moulay, j'ai posé cette question, je vais la poser à tous nos participants et notamment à Pisha from Indonesia. Et elle n'a pas forcément d'éléments de réponse parce que son outil qu'elle a présenté se focalise principalement sur l'aspect terrestre. Cependant, je vais demander à tous les collègues, and I'm going to turn over to maybe colleague Susanna. And do you have anything for you on the marine side?
No, actually, well, we're also focusing on terrestrial ecosystem. I can only comment that it's a question that is a running question, and it's very complex. So a way forward is to use all available information and as much up-to-date information to inform how to deal with protected marine areas. But I mean, as the same as in terrestrial ecosystem, this is a running question with many aspects that it's not a simple. There is no a simple answer.
Ouais, ok, thank you. En français, pour traduire, c'est que pour la Colombie notamment, c'est aussi le même problème, c'est que l'outil se focalise plus sur l'aspect terrestre. Et ce que Suzanne a dit, c'est que le plus important à ce stade, c'est de vraiment collecter toutes les données disponibles pour les aires marines protégées et d'essayer de mobiliser des données pour créer des outils adaptés. Mais c'est des questions extrêmement difficiles lorsque ça touche les aires protégées marines. Donc c'est encore délicat. Martin, would you like to translate that question to Alex in Spanish?
Yeah, could you please repeat that?
Yes. The question is how to orientate how to do the management of marine protected areas to adapt to climate change.
Using GIS, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say so.
Alex, la pregunta es cómo utilizar todas estas herramientas y sistemas de información geográfica para orientar el manejo de áreas protegidas marinas. ¿Cuál es tu opinión al respecto?
Ok, nosotros estamos justamente enfocados un poco en que, mencioné un poco en la exposición, era necesario medir digamos, el activo principal del ecosistema marino costero, que era la arena. Y por eso estamos viendo estas mediciones de lo que es pérdida de erosión o cambio de línea de costa, ¿no? Okay. Para poder promover proyectos de conservación y recuperación.
Okay, what Peru is currently doing is analyzing the coastline and erosion in the sand ecosystems for the coastal habitats as the main object of conservation of that type of habitats, and that's how they are addressing on coastal ecosystems. Alex, ¿hay algo sobre la parte marina exclusivamente?
De la parte marina tenemos unos institutos de investigación que, digamos, generan cierta información, pero estamos trabajando en justamente articular esa información para poder tomar mejores decisiones. El problema es que ahí la información está un poco desarticulada.
Okay. So I am asking Alex if there is something about exclusively on marine habitats, and he responded that information is, let's say, spread over different entities and agencies, and they are working hard on trying to harmonize or at least gathering that information, but it's kind of difficult because it's spread over different entities and on different, types of databases. ¿Algo más que quieras agregar, Alex?
No, eso es todo.
Okay.
Gracias.
Over to you,
Mary. Thank you. Je repars sur du français. Donc, pour le Pérou, Alex a expliqué que le focus, vraiment, c'était plus sur les écosystèmes côtiers. Et notamment, l'équipe travaille sur l'analyse de l'érosion côtière en se focalisant sur les écosystèmes avec le sable. Et notamment, ils prennent cet écosystème comme référence pour pousser pour des analyses plus en détail. Et pour ce qui concerne l'aspect des écosystèmes marins, le souci, c'est que beaucoup des informations sont étalées entre plusieurs entités, plusieurs ministères, et que l'équipe travaille vraiment dur afin de pouvoir harmoniser et collecter toutes les données sur les écosystèmes marins, mais c'est un travail très difficile comme on le sait tous. Alex, this is great. I think you're putting the finger on something that is really important that we've seen for the 6NR a lot, and the fact that data is spread out through many entities, and it's really hard sometimes to get data all together to consolidate an analysis and then take the corresponding decisions following the analysis. So thank you for reminding that. And I would like also to turn over colleagues from Costa Rica. I know you mentioned with this first map that you're working not just on land, but also on the sea. And so do you have any elements of response you'd like to share here?
Yes, we even though our colleagues have said a lot of interesting things, and one issue is that we face the same challenges in order to adapt to climate change and make better decisions. We need to have information, and in relation to the sea, we have not yet systematized all the information as we have done to the land, And this was evidence in the 6NR, but we also are working on environmental accounts here in Costa Rica, and we were trying to develop an marine resources account, but the main struggle that we have right now is data to construct and build these accounts. And what we're doing right now is integrating these entities that you all mentioned that have the information scattered, and create a group work that can provide environmental statistics on the ocean in order to move forward with this, to understand the problem, why we don't have information, what do we need to get that information, and to understand also what new techniques of gathering information are available around the world that we can use and we don't know yet. For these processes. This is something that we need to prioritize right now, because we haven't prioritized the sea, and it has been evidence. And the 6NR, we also build information, but it was built with perception of these experts. And this is some information that is available and is useful to make decisions, but also we need to improve those information available. And of course, there are a lot of policies that are being developed here in relation to adaptation to climate change and the coastal areas, and we will be happy to share them with you more specifically to address that question.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much. Back in French, le Costa Rica fait face au même problème, donc vraiment on va dire l'étalage de l'information et le fait que la collecte des informations n'est pas systématique et en tout cas pas aussi systématique que ça l'est pour l'aspect terrestre. Et en ce moment, notamment l'équipe des 6e rapports nationaux travaille sur consolider un groupe de travail qui pourrait échanger plus facilement les données. Et se focalise aussi sur cette idée de trouver un moyen plus efficace et une technique plus efficace pour partager les données entre les différentes entités. Mais voilà, comme tout le monde l'a dit, je pense que tout le monde s'accorde, la mer, l'océan n'a pas été une priorité par rapport à la Terre pour le moment, et c'est en train de changer. Et comme le dit Raphaël, il faut vraiment prioriser l'aspect marin maintenant. Thank you to all of you for this element of response. And Moulay, I hope this answers your question. At this stage, I don't see any other hand raised from our participants. I would encourage you all to take advantage of having experts and well, maybe share 1 or 2 questions, or if you don't share questions and don't have questions, you're welcome to also share your expertise and experience in the context. I do have a question for actually all of our speakers, and it's this webinar session is focusing on national database and national system. To what extent do you envision a regional collaboration? Because we know that ecosystems do not stop at borders, right? So I would be curious, maybe we can start with Susanna. I would be curious to see if you are working somehow with neighboring countries and if leads to great result. Is that something you do?
Yes, actually we have several projects at Combo. So the initiative of the Colombian bond, the idea is to be a national node, but also a regional node. So we are working with colleagues from neighbor countries and Mexico that I know of to consolidate that bond regionally. We also have a couple of projects, also NASA-funded projects with colleagues from Peru and Ecuador. And our colleagues from the land management program have several working projects with Venezuelans, Bolivians, Ecuador, and Peru for the human footprint layers and the use of those layers to inform protected areas. So yeah, I mean, Humboldt is is active enhancing and promoting and collaborating with regional colleagues.
Great, awesome. And what about you, Pisha, in Indonesia? How does that work?
The tool is still very preliminary, and we're still, working at the national level. But I could see how this, we can encourage collaboration not only at the regional level but also at the global level for sustainable commodity supply chain. So let's say, palm oil. This tool will give you information on expansion of palm oil. It's like whether palm oil is planted in the right place, I mean the legal land or not. You could use this tool to monitor that and to make sure that your supply chain is sustainable. So this tool is obviously can be used, by private sector companies that are sourcing or producing from Indonesia, and we know companies are not only local but also from our neighbors like Malaysia and Singapore, but also like globally. But at this point, we still haven't promoted this tool because we're still developing the tool. I think once the tool is finalized, that's when we're going to encourage and start opening up for more collaboration, especially on the ESG risk tool that UNEP is developing right now.
Great, super interesting. Thank you, Pisha. What about you colleagues in Costa Rica? How does that work at the regional level?
Thank you for your question. The answer is yes and no. Yes, we do have initiatives of collaboration with different, with our neighbor countries and with different countries that help us support our processes here. But regarding information, I know that the people from the Coast Guards are connected with our neighbor countries in narco traffic operations, and they share information that side. But on the environmental area, we're not there yet. Right, we have this initiative of the Marine Corridor of the Pacific, where Colombia, Ecuador, Costa Rica, and Panama are joined together and finding initiatives to manage better that particular area of the sea that we have in common, and where biodiversity doesn't meet any borders. But we need to move further on having more information available and how that information is flowing, and these assets are flowing between our countries. We're not working in that yet, and it's a very good awareness that you are mentioning today, that we should also be connected on how we are monitoring biodiversity between our neighbor countries. That is evidence that we are not doing that and we should do it, because yes, biodiversity meets no borders.
Exactly, that's really interesting. I'm glad to, even if it's not in place yet, it's interesting to see the prospect of it. What about you, Alex? In Peru, do you work at the regional level and with colleagues on GIS?
Bueno, nosotros venimos trabajando para promover, igual que un poco como lo mencionó Susana, en el proyecto entre Perú, Colombia, Ecuador, para generar información, digamos, del ODS 15. Y también venimos principalmente teniendo un rol más de gestión de información para promover básicamente las inversiones en conservación y en recuperación en los ecosistemas a nivel nacional en el Perú. Nos hemos focalizado mucho más en ecosistemas un poco terrestres. La parte marina es un poco compleja en el Perú por los actores que intervienen, pero sí es un tema que está en agenda y que lo estamos evaluando, ¿no? Porque estamos como irás a comenzar.
Okay, as Susana mentioned before, Peru is working along with Colombia and Ecuador on regional data sets and trying to gather information for a regional perspective towards the results of Sustainable Development Goal number 15. And Alex also mentioned that the focus on Peru now is on terrestrial ecosystems. The reasons he explained it before, that the marine zone is a little bit more complex. And yeah, the focus now is mainly on terrestrial ecosystems for the Peru. So over to you, Mary.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Martin, for the translation. It's very helpful. At this stage, and it's been an hour and a half we're together now, at this stage I don't see any other questions from our participants. I will leave maybe 20 seconds to have someone raising his or her hand and see if we have a bit more questions. Take advantage of the fact that you have those experts in GIS with us today. And if we do not have any additional questions, then I'm going to turn over to Alex again for maybe concluding words or concluding remarks before we end this webinar. Right, and if you want to translate that.
Excuse me.
Yeah, for sure. Alex, ¿algún mensaje final que quieras transmitir?
Bueno, básicamente que nuestro planificación o nuestro, digamos, aporte que hemos tenido últimamente en estos años como ministerio es asumir un rol más de gestión de información para servicios que apunten específicamente en cambios en el territorio y no concentrarnos en generar información por información. A veces menciono mucho la palabra de inversiones públicas y privadas, porque, digamos, uno de los cuellos de botella que tenemos es eso. Y lo que creemos, después de una discusión, digamos, dentro de todo el ministerio, es que es importante generar información estratégica para que dinamice estas prácticas, porque en realidad información relativamente existe mucha. El problema es que como que no está bien articulada a lo que demandan, digamos, los tomadores de decisiones, y ese es el cuello de botella que queremos cerrar.
Okay, gracias, Alex. So part of the final remarks from Alex is that the ministry is now focusing on the information management in terms to assure services and produce a change in the territory. It's not just gathering information just for the purpose of gathering information. It's just is about to having an impact and a change in the territory. He also mentioned information to influence public and private investments, and the purpose of producing strategic information for decision makers, because Alex highlighted that information already exists. It's just sometimes the matter that information is not oriented for decision makers to, you know, take the best informed decisions over the territory. Over to you, Mary.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex. Thank you, and thanks, Martin, for the translation. Colleague from Costa Rica, do you have any concluding remarks?
Yes, thank you very much on behalf of Melibea and myself and our colleagues here from the PRIAS laboratory. On final remarks, we want to say two things. First, of course, we have to work on integrating more the information sources and developing the standards for information to flow and the structure for the government to gather all this information and make it available for users and make it useful, you know. And to make it useful, and this is the other idea, we need to communicate these ideas. We need people to know what is going on, what information is being developed, what analysis we are getting to make their own conclusions, also act and react on that information, and be aware of the importance of the conservation of biodiversity and every other aspect of our environment and our lives. And for that, these kind of initiatives like these technical webinars are very important to promote this information and engage more people. And we want to also congratulate you on organizing this event and our colleagues that also presented their initiatives from Peru, Colombia, and Indonesia. Muchas gracias.
Thanks so much, Rafael and Melibea. Thank you for that. And I fully agree with you. And I think this is also something we've seen a lot in the 6NR team, the need to communicate results and not having these results, stuck with a scientific community. It has to be spread out, it has to be understood, and it has to be used for sound decision making. I will turn to Susanna, maybe a few words to conclude this webinar.
Thanks, Marianne. Well, other than thank you again for organizing and the invitation, I want to address one other aspect about the challenges that we have in using information, and is that we need to do it fast. I saw in some of the presentations the use of technology, the web applications, the participatory processes to address some of these questions, and I think that's the right place to do it, because it basically will guarantee that any decision that we take on the ground will be validated right away for the people that participated in the process. But we need to grab any technology and any technical methods to not only communicate, but communicate the urgency of having or making decisions in order to protect what is left. And in Colombia we see that day by day we are losing a lot of forests in many areas, and at a speed that is way faster than the speed in which we could even communicate or we could even think about solutions. So that's a very serious challenge, and technology could help definitely, but we need to maybe think in other strategies. I don't know.
Thanks, Susanna. Agree. Technology can help. We just need to make it work for us. And we started with her. We're going to conclude with her. Pisha, do you have a final words maybe before you finally can go to bed in Indonesia?
Yeah, I think what most important is that we need to ensure the tool is being used by decision makers, and that is not only by the government, but also private sector and also NGOs. Like for Indonesia, country as big as Indonesia, involving as many stakeholders, not only in the monitoring, but also enforcement and validation of the information that we provide. It's very important. Like the government, like we use, we develop automatic algorithm, but there's always errors in, automatic algorithm. And so having, like the tool will have to involve as many users as possible, to validate and also to provide us the information. And like for the government, like I didn't show in the presentation, but the tool can also like provide analysis on land suitability, and this is very important for decision maker at the subnational level, because we have, like Indonesia, we have decentralization system. Unfortunately, the government sometimes, when they plan the land use, they don't know which land is suitable for which commodity, so they would end up like when they design the spatial plan, they would just end up like assigning or designate land that is actually not suitable for the commodity. The land should, like say peatland, they should be protected, but unfortunately they don't have that map, they don't have the information. And so this tool, we hope that this tool can provide that information that is necessary for the government to make a better and sustainable decision when it comes to land use allocation.
Thanks, Pisha. Yeah, this is exactly what we've been trying to do in the 6NR, and making sure that we're creating, actionable maps, and that we can use GIS in a constructive way that will bring, more information to decision makers for implementing their national strategies and any plan. Well, thank you very much to each of the speakers who was there today and participated in this webinar. It was a very informative and interesting session, and I would like also to thank all the participants for attending this webinar and for interacting and engaging with us. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we will upload the recording of this session on the NBSAP Forum YouTube channel and the presentations on the NBSAP Forum. The next session will be hosted in 2 weeks on Tuesday, 11 June, from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. New York time, so it's later than today. And we're going to have 5 countries, Belize, Ecuador, Haiti, Samoa, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, presenting, and they will share their experience on how can spatial data in the 6NR help conservation monitoring and management of biodiversity in their country. We look forward to seeing you there. And in the meantime, thank you again, and I wish to have a great day or a great evening. Please conclude the webinar.